You thought you killed us off.
I tried.
We're back. We're mad as hell.
You want to have a great shootout of 2010?
Fine.
Let's do it.
5 paces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Jens. Wow, this has been an enormous
Undertaking?
task. Yeah.
Yeah. Tests are hard, man. Tests are harder than a real shoot, I always say. I mean, there's so many details, and you got to be fair to everybody. There's politics involved. There's all that. Tests are difficult, so.
Okay, but let's get beyond this politics because we were determined to make this an unbiased test.
Mm-hmm.
We don't sell any of these cameras. We don't particularly care how these cameras fare out, and really more importantly, this is not an awards type of test.
Right. Originally, when we decided to do this test, we were kind of going to shoot it ourselves, but quickly realized that to make it more legit, we need to remove ourselves from the immediate shooting and put experts in, like Robert, Gary.
I love that when we were talking to
Philip.
Robert, yeah, exactly. When we were talking to Robert on that phone, we were like, come on, come here. And he's like, all right, I'll come.
Yeah.
And he really sort of ran the test. He didn't care about film, DSLRs, whatever. And I just want to say that we make lots of programming. You know, you and I have been in the business for 27 years, and we've made a lot of shows. And we don't really care. Like on our Film Fellas show, we never talk about Zacuto. On our Critics show, we never talk about Zacuto.
It's a different part of Zacuto. Everybody was asking us, well, you know, you're not selling stuff here, are you? And no, we're not. Here, this is part of our, if you want to call it, our entertainment business, where we provide information and video for filmmakers.
Absolutely. Okay, so I just want people to know that, you know, in certain cases, we obviously film, which is the gold standard, we wanted to use film because film would show us how well the DSLRs perform in relation to them.
You need something to compare to, and why not compare it to the best? So.
Right. Since we were removed from the test, let's talk about some of the administrators of the test.
Right.
You go first.
Well, we mentioned earlier Bob. When he jumped on, he was our first sort of shooter, if you want to call it, the first guy that we added to the bunch to administer the test. And quickly after that, we thought, okay, well, we have to have Gary Adcock, because he is the expert on all things digital.
Right, he is.
What do they call him,
sort of
Digerati?
That's
Or
kind of
something
some
like that?
term I've heard bantered about.
And then let's see, who else
We
did
had
we have?
Philip
Philip
Bloom.
Bloom, of course. How could we forget Philip? Sorry.
He basically,
Well, he set the picture profiles and essentially ran the DSLR cameras. He knows those cameras inside and out. So.
right, so we couldn't make a test without him because he's sort of, you know, him and Vincent are kind of leading the band to this whole DSLR. So Bob,
Right.
major DP on the set, Gary, the Digerati, Phil brings the sort of use of these cameras, and now we got Ryan Emerson
At Astro.
at Astro Filmworkers, and he is the colorist that we used to do all the coloring on this project. And we should also mention Resolution Digital Studios, where we
course.
shot, Schumacher Camera, where we
Right.
got the film cameras from, and Astro Filmworkers, where we did the color timing in their color timing theater. So we really pulled some favors back.
Right. So out of all the cameras we used, we invited everybody to come and join and be on set while we were shooting. Unfortunately, only one took us up on that, and that's Canon.
Yeah, but to be fair, Canon really had, I mean, we told them, you're not going to get any sort of obligation, we're not going to do what you say, and
Preferential treatment or anything like that.
and how about the fact that how cool Tim was about the whole lensing issue.
Right. No, I asked him straight away earlier because you know, Canon is a major glass maker, and I said, Tim, we really want to use Zeiss glass throughout this to keep everything as even as possible. And he said, I have no problem. I'm not going to tell you guys what to do whatsoever.
Using Zeiss glass across the board allowed us to deal with it in film and in video.
It takes out other variables.
Right. So, I mean, I'm pretty proud of this test. I mean, I think we've done several of these. This is our third one. And I think that this is what we could call a very scientific test.
We backed it up with a lot of science. I mean, we did
Right.
tests before the tests,
Right.
you know, to figure out what the optimum ASA is to shoot at.
So late in the game, this T2i camera came out. So we tried to include it. It's not included in every test, although we have noticed that it's very similar to the 7D.
Yeah, essentially when you're looking at it, I think it's safe to say that when you're looking at our first initial tests that it's not included in, it should look like the 7D. But
Yeah.
we got it later, and we decided to shoot some supplemental tests. We shot some color that people were requesting to see.
Oh, that's a good point. One of the things that we did is we shot the test and we viewed it on monitors here. But then when we went into the color timing, it was a color timing theater, which was amazing. I mean, you could actually see it on a, what was that, about a 13-foot screen? 14-foot?
Yeah, I thought he said 15, but
Okay, a 15-foot
large.
screen, yeah. So we were all sitting in there and we're watching this as if it would look in a theater, and Bob and Gary and Phil and you and I were all commenting, and people are going to see that.
Right.
And then we decided, you know, that people are going to be watching this on the web, and both you and I were concerned that they would say, oh, well, you know, on the web, everything looks good.
We've heard that before from some of our tests.
Right.
They've actually said that, you know, well, everything looks good on the web.
Right.
How's it going to look on the big screen? Bob and I were talking, and to, you know, satisfy people, we decided to screen it at the Stag Theater at Skywalker Ranch.
Which
and-
was amazing, by the
Oh,
way.
that's probably the best theater in the world.
Right.
And then also at AFI, and that way we had industry professionals there screening it on a large screen so we could totally see subtleties, differences like that,
Right.
and quell the issue well. Everything will look good on
But the
the
cool
small
part
screen.
of it was that you're going to hear the feedback of Rick McCullum and Stephen Goldblatt at the Stag Theater at Lucasfilm. And then when we went to AFI, we're going to have Shane Hurlbut, and there were people from every company there, Panasonic, Fuji, every company was there.
It was
And-
fun to hear.
Yeah, it was fun to hear. So since not everybody's going to be able to see this in a theater, they're still going to be able to hear what the community says about it watching it in a theater.
Right.
So you're going to have the theatrical experience watching it on the web.
But what we did notice, especially with monitors these days, is that it wasn't that different. We can see the things they're talking about that they're seeing on the big screen on our little screens. So, you know,
In HD on the web.
on HD on the web, yes.
Yeah, I was incredibly
Yeah,
impressed.
I was a little surprised at that as well. So.
Right. So I think people are going to really enjoy seeing this.
Yeah.
And it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So Jens, what's the first thing that we're going to see today?
That should be the bathroom, the high key scene. So it's a brightly lit scene. This one happens to be backlit mainly. Again, this is a test to kind of really stress these cameras out. So heavily backlit. If you take a look at the bricks, the glass bricks, because that's where you're going to start to see the DSLR cameras probably lose their detail first.
We really got to talk about what we exposed for.
So what we had Ryan do at the lab there was that we had him time for her face. So her face is the constant here. What you're going to see then is the differences start to change at the top and the bottom of the scale quickly. The highlights and the dark areas, the shadow areas, are going to start to close in or start to suffer first here.
Right. So we want people to look at the face and then see what the bricks are doing. And then we want people to look like under the edge of the tub there on the left and see how they handle these midtones. And then there's some black tones in the upper right part of the screen.
Right. Also inside the tub is a good place. There's some midtones in there as well where you can start to see the differences. But the initial thing that you're going to see start to happen first is the loss of detail at the top and bottom of the scale, particularly in the bricks first for the DSLRs. And the film pretty much holds detail throughout.
Okay, great. Let's take a look at it.
All right, first test. That's our high key bathtub scene.
And the shots are about 10-second duration here on this particular run through. All right, so here we're using the Kodak 5217 and the Fuji
The Fuji 8553. Right, we rated them both at 200.
And what about the DSLR cameras?
Those are rated at 160. All right, we're going to show these in this order. First it's going to be the Kodak 5217, the Fuji 8553, the Canon 5D Mark II, the Canon 7D, the Canon 1D Mark IV, the Nikon D3S, and then the Panasonic GH1, all at 1080 24p.
Except the Nikon, which was only capable of doing 720/24.
Right. All right, here's the Kodak, and as expected, I can see a lot of detail in the bricks. Even in the dark areas under the tub, you can see plenty of detail.
No, this is the master, man. Here's the Fuji, same thing. We made this. This is what it should look like, fully stretched out. There is no, everything is got detail here.
Right. But it's nice to see these cameras in contrast because you can see how far they've come.
This looks pretty damn good.
Yeah, it's
li-
really remarkable.
Little loss of detail in the bricks. Here you got even more much more loss of detail in the bricks.
But now knowing this, you can shoot accordingly.
Exactly.
That's kind of what I expected, although better than I thought.
Mm-hmm. Now the 1D is looking much more like the 5D in loss of detail there.
Right, it's got to be the larger sensor.
Yeah.
But now coming up here, the D3S, especially because of the motion JPEG, I think you're seeing a lot of that motion down in the lower right corner there, and other little artifacts. But it's 720.
It's still a beautiful picture.
Yeah.
Now here, this GH1 this is where I got my, everybody thinks this looks great, but it's very sharp and extremely contrasty.
Right, but I mean, I still think it looks great.
Okay, now this is the same test with this 3-second durations. So here's the Kodak, now Fuji, 5D, 7D, 1D, D3S, GH1.
All right, so why don't we hear from the guys in the theater, see what their comments were.
Terrific, let's do it.
All right.
So you can see the bricks, we're just starting to lose detail there.
Oh, I see detail.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's pretty taxed out.
Now,
Look at that, 5D was pretty close.
Yeah, but 70, whoa. I like the 70.
You can see the 5Ds blowing up
In the center.
Yeah, of course.
The 7D more so.
Well, which ones do we like?
I like all of them for different reasons.
I didn't expect it to even come close to the Kodak or Fuji stock.
I was surprised at how good it really was, I mean, in its range.
It actually performed better than my expectations were for it.
I had no idea what to expect, to be honest with you. I mean, because I've really only seen these cameras on the web. And when I see them on the web, they're gorgeous,
I never expected that they would be holding shadow detail comparable to what we're seeing on film.
Every single camera is shined in a different area that we have preferences on each different test. Well, I think the 1D looks better on that. I think the 5D looks better on that. I think the 7D looks better on that. So it's really interesting.
Film is clearly the winner. It's what we're accustomed to. It's what we grew up with. It's how most people, gauge everything as a reference. But
film is known for having really superior latitude. The top-end digital cameras have really been pushing that. And latitude is a huge important thing because it allows you to light much faster, use natural light in a different way, not have to film, not have to handle highlights. So this is significant.
And this isn't made as a beauty scene. Like if you look at her skin tone, that's really what we tried to match.
Well, it's good. It's great to have those highlights there riding around that.
The shadows hold up pretty well, similar to film, but it's the highlights that go.
Yeah.
Obviously. But that's what you work around.
it's certainly, you could certainly intercut between it without a question.
There's so much highlight latitude that we're seeing the blue bricks a lot, brighter in the digital.
Well, you have the ability to extract, from a raw image, both shadow and highlight detail that's not read anywhere else. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of people don't realize how much goes into the raw sensor data that's pruned away just from the sheer size level and speed.
If we bring the blue bricks around down to where they were in the film, the whites come down and it looks dull. So you see what I mean? So you see the ramifications for not having more highlight detail.
The shadows hold up pretty well, similar to film, but it's the highlights that go.
Yeah.
Obviously. But that's what you work around in this case.
The D3's worse.
Oh yeah, that's a 720.
And it's
camera.
also 720, right?
But wait, it's low light
Here's
capacity.
the GH1, ironically.
I know, but
There's something about the GH1 that looks nice.
Well,
it's very pleasing.
Sharp.
it's sharp and it's not a lot of textural grain that's moving around, and the noise is not, you know, I keep calling it grain.
I didn't even expect to compete with any of these, but it really was kind of still up there.
It almost felt like it had a baked-in look to it, though.
Yeah.
Like
A baked-in look.
yeah, there wasn't as much to do with the image as there were the other cameras.
I think a lot of that is down to the fact that we were really not able to tweak the profile to its optimum level, which is what we were doing with the other cameras.
I mean, every time I look at it, I kind of see something new in there that I didn't notice before.
And what's the second thing we're going to see today?
Yeah, that one is essentially a dimly lit scene. Also a latitude scene, though, where we have a guy starts out with just a flame from an oil lamp. Can't quite read his book that he's doing. The girl in the back turns on the light for him. He blows out the candle and now can read by the reflection of the light behind him off the book in his face. So there's a lot of interesting elements to look at here, particularly the flame at first, just essentially a 1-foot candle kind of scene.
Right. It's interesting to look how the digital cameras, or DSLRs, really performed in there. Now, also keep an eye out when the model is sort of in the foreground a little bit, and then she moves to the background.
Yeah, it was meant to be to where when she steps back far away from the light, that's her exposure there. Some interesting things to note is the aberration from the light bulb for the different cameras and even the film stocks. That's a fun thing to kind of look for there.
Okay, great. Let's take a look at
All
it.
right. All right, now we're doing our second latitude test. This is the low-key test, what we call our light bulb scene.
And the shots are about 10-second duration here on this particular run through.
All right, so in this low-key test, the film was rated at 400. It's 5219 and 8573, and the DSLRs were set to 320.
And here's the order of presentation. We're going to do the Kodak first, Fuji second, then the Canon 5D Mark II, 7D, 1D, D3S, and the GH1.
All right, so here we're seeing the Kodak, and what's amazing about it is, of course, how nicely it lights his face before she turns on the bulb. Notice what the bulb is doing, though.
Yeah, the bulb is sort of the key thing in this shot. See, here you can actually see the fingerprints on the bulb.
Yeah, and even the filament, for that matter. And it's got a nice pattern, the way it sort of shimmers.
The 5D, boy, that was amazing in low light. Well, this is where these cameras shine.
Mm-hmm. Now there's no detail in the bulb, but I mean, again, if you know your limitations, you can shoot with it.
It has an interesting aesthetic, though, the bulb, I thought.
It looks good. All right, 70 is similar in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
these cameras are really good in low light.
Well, I mean, that's where really film can't compete with these cameras in low light. I mean, that's obvious.
Right, and that's apparent when we go into the higher ASAs. We're still at 320 here, though.
Right. All right, now the D3.
Yeah, you're seeing some compression with the
Wow,
D3S.
Look
but
around the bulb there. It's got all kinds of stuff.
It's got a really unique signature around that bulb. What was it that they called that?
Halation.
Yeah, the halation, right?
Halation is crazy. Okay, now this one, the halation around this is not good.
Right. No, it's got banding.
Yeah. Okay, now this is the same test.
This first one is the section where it's just lit by candlelight.
Okay, so here's the Kodak, Fuji, 5D,
7D, 1D, Nikon D3S, and the GH1.
Okay, so now we're going to look at the same scene, but we just want to look at the section where the model's in their optimal light. So here's the Kodak,
The Fuji,
5D,
the 7D,
the 1D,
the Nikon.
and the GH1.
So here's the 2-second durations where we're actually looking at the book reflection light on his face.
Okay, so here's the Kodak,
The Fuji,
5D,
the 7D,
1D,
the Nikon D3S.
and the GH1.
It's interesting that across the board we all kind of think the digital cameras are rendering an intent better with just the flame, the candle flame. That may not come through on the web when we compress it, but you see that little bit of his left ear with that candle that we hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
The difference between film and digital with just lit by candlelight and this is the 5D. I mean, it's a matter of aesthetic at this point.
That's a tough call between that 1D and 5D.
I think it gets down to is how it renders the light bulb.
The film has that beautiful blooming quality to it,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like it's bleeding across the imagery.
Right. And you can even
and the video's kind of a white hole.
yeah, a little bit more so.
Look at the edge on the light bulb there. Yeah, the 7D seems to be reproducing that flare much cleaner here. And that cross-shaped halo I find very annoying.
But
I can
she
kind
looks
of live
nice.
with it. She looks so much better as a mid-tone than the Canons did.
Yeah. This is weird. It's like this camera performs really good in some areas and not as good in others.
Well, it looks like it's designed to either work in the mids very, very well because of the compression, or at, you know, with the noise reduction on it to work at a very, very high speed with a really, really creamy texture. The shadows in the 1D.
I actually like the bulb better on the 5D.
Yeah, I do too.
Not bad on the guy though.
Yeah.
Look at the flame. The flame actually looks quite nice there.
Really, the banding on the light bulb for me
Is the only problem on his one, yeah.
Yeah, so again, if I were to blink and look at these scenes, if the bulb weren't there, I don't think I'd know which was which. Did you think that it would have that type of latitude against the film, or less latitude, or more?
I expected it to look good. I didn't expect it to look this good.
They're shining. I think these cameras are shining.
I was actually shocked at how well the 7D compared to the rest of the cameras.
Because I would have never expected that a digital still camera would have performed that way.
Also, that transition from film to video was nowhere near the shocking ledge it used to be. You know, that
No, we should be incredibly excited that we are actually in the middle of this
Revolution.
this
Evolution,
this
revolution.
yeah.
whatever.
I mean, I've obviously shot it now extensively with each of them, and you know, it's interesting to me that the 5D still feels like the king.
The 1D is great. I don't think it's necessarily adds a huge amount more.
Yeah, I think the 5D is actually really, really nice.
And the
Wow.
flame is holding up much more like film.
And that's an aesthetic that, you know, that's a personal preference at this point.
Point is dynamic range.
Absolutely.
And the dynamic range is astonishing.
When you really start to look at it, it's all about sensor size.
I just know that shooting the 5D or any of those cameras, if you do get a raw file, the dynamic range is better than film.
And it's all about, if you have a 21.5 megapixel, the pixels are this big. When you got the 7D, the pixels are smaller. So the ability for that light to get into those pixels is cut down. It's just so with the 5D, the pixels are much larger, and you get that wonderful gradation that you see in your shadow areas and the tone and how it gradates. And then the 7D gets a little more contrastier, and the 1D is kind of a combo of the two.
And what's the third thing we're going to see today?
Oh, you're talking about the charts itself.
Which is an incredible test because it really shows you the latitude difference between these cameras.
There you can clearly see the range that film has. And then when we start to show the DSLRs, how they're a little more limited in their terms of their resolution range. I mean, it's basically that simple. That doesn't always tell the whole story, though. I mean, that's the science behind it, that it shows you its limits. But when you're showing these in real sets and real shooting, it might not matter as much, you know, depending on how you light it and things like that. It's really kind of the goal we were trying to do, instead of just shooting all charts. You want to see these things in real situations and sometimes stressful situations.
Right, well, we have some coming up.
Yeah.
Okay, great, let's take a look at it.
All right. What we're looking at here is a 13-stop latitude DSC Labs chart. And the first one up is Kodak.
Look at that, you can...
Well, film, as we expected, you'd see, you know, all these steps.
Both in the Kodak and the Fuji.
Right.
Yeah.
The 5D at 10.5.
Yeah, 70 is about 11. It might be
Right.
hard to do on your computer screen, but
On the histogram, we're telling you right now that it is 11. The 1D was at 11 stops.
so you can actually count 11 separate stops here.
And the Nikon D3S at 11. looking at it visually, the Nikon camera looks scrappier. Now that's the compression that you're seeing from the type of codec it has.
GH1 is less at about 9.
Yeah. But now in episode 2, what are we going to see?
Well, we're going to see 3 things. We're going to see this color test, which is really nice. It's just sort of what these cameras look like in a real environment. And then we're going to see, this was kind of real late, we threw this in, and I sort of just said, I want to see this. Just in case, even though everybody says it would look like bad, I want to do a green screen test.
Right. Yeah, that kept coming up in conversations. Well, yeah, they won't key good.
I want to see that for
right.
myself.
Yeah.
And the third thing we're going to see is a resolution test. Tell me about this resolution test.
What we did for a resolution test was we used the bathroom scene, and essentially we refocused for the magazine you saw in the background and blew it up to 360% or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's huge.
For the 2K. And we're looking at the type and that in there. You'll see when you watch it, it becomes apparent, the resolution of these different cameras.
Okay. One of the interesting things is we got the T2i late, so you're going to see these tests all with the T2i.
The green screen and the color test. Tests are one thing, but there's nothing like seeing a real professional shoot a project with this in the field.
So let's take a look at some examples of what this footage can look like with the DP who just masters this camera and makes it look amazing. So now we're going to take a look at Philip Bloom's piece from Skywalker Ranch.
Yeah, this piece is beautiful, and we saw it on a 45-foot screen at Skywalker Ranch, and it was astonishing.